Hey, you are listening to Oh Crap Parenting with me, your host, Jamie Glowacki. This is a podcast for conscious parents who drop the F-bomb a lot. Hey, you guys. Welcome. I am jumping right in from our last episode where I talked about gentle parenting gone wrong. And today I wanted to just piggyback on that episode with the Surgeon General's warning. So, the Surgeon General has put out a warning that parenting is hazardous to your health, particularly your mental health. And I have found this to be true, which isn't to say I don't think people should stop having kids, but we have to examine this because we are in a crisis. And I have boiled it down to really two crises. The first is a time crisis. And the second is a self-care crisis. We have no time. We are overwhelmed. Every single parent I work with has no time. And potty training right now in our society is a disaster. Like, I know I don't usually talk about potty training, but that is a branch of my work because parents have no time. Children are expected to learn this milestone in 3 days flat, go back to daycare, wiping their own butt, self-initiating. It is crazy. So crazy that I got to the point where I was like, gosh, is potty training just taking longer now? And then I'm like, no, potty training has always taken like 7 to 10 days to get over the major hump. It's that nobody has 7 days to devote to this. Now, to be sure, I think there are some systemic things that we have very little control over, even though we think we vote for it. It never seems to change anything, much like daylight savings time. We have horrible birth practices in the US. We have terrible maternity and paternity leave. Children are considered a burden in the US. Like if you have a kid, it's like, it's kind of crazy. Daycare is cost prohibitive. It's well documented that if both parents work, one person's salary goes almost exclusively to daycare. A lot of daycares went out of business after the pandemic. There were price hikes and, a lot less availability. Same thing with preschools. And we've moved away from our village, or we have a hard time gathering a village because of time and resources. We have financial crises all over the place. Groceries are like off the chain for price wise. So there are a lot of things getting in our way with time and self-care. But I had asked on Instagram what people do for self-care and barriers to self-care. And there's another part. There's the time crisis, self-care crisis. And the time crisis is really about not just that we have to work more and our children may be out of our care, but also it's well documented. I kind of went down a rabbit hole with this Surgeon General's warning and listened to a lot of podcasts. I listened to a lot of news reports, and it really comes down to kind of two things. And one is hyper-vigilant intensive parenting is a huge one. And so is education. And I kind of want to pull those two apart and then talk about self-care and what people said on Instagram, because I think there are some really great tools there. So hyper-vigilant parenting is the problem and is one of the problems. The problem with hyper-vigilant parenting is that it sucks us dry. And that really relates back to the last podcast I did and the whole gentle parenting and what we are expected to do as parents. And everybody is walking around, number one, far too protective. Like, our kids have to go through discomfort to grow. Everybody does. And so we are so protective of their feelings that we rush in to fix all kinds of things like crazy. And, in the last episode I mentioned, if somebody calls your kid a name and they have a meltdown about it, you will go try to fix the other kid. You will not, you may let your child have their feelings, but you will try to fix the scenario for your child. And we see that. I see more concern now about self-esteem and wanting my kid to be happy. We have a crisis of low distress tolerance. Like, nobody can stand to see their kid a little distressed or unhappy. these are all feelings that we will all experience throughout our lives. So making a bubble for your child so they never experience uncomfortable things and uncomfortable feelings, and we let them have those feelings while we validate them, but don't fix it. This is key. And so that's where some of the hypervigilance comes from. There's also way overprotection. Now, if you have a kid who has a phone, I'm all about protecting them online, right? And that's one of Jonathan Haidt. He wrote The Anxious Generation. He has 4 tenets about social media use. And the 4th tenet is that kids need in-person free play without adults around. And that really can happen even at younger ages. Do you have to watch them carefully at younger ages? Of course, any scenario can go bad, but we are intervening far too much. And it's part of our societal zeitgeist right now. It's really kind of spooky. Like most parents, wait a minute, my brain's working faster than my mouth. If you've noticed, there's less kids in casts, right? Less kids are getting hurt because if your kid gets hurt, you get blamed, right? Like if your kid falls off the playground structure and breaks their arm, you get blamed. And I've heard of parents who even get called in for questioning from Child Protective Services if they take their kid to the ER for just about anything. So it is a scary, that to me is scary. That's way more scary than your kid getting their arm broken. We are being far too protective and not letting kids play together and get hurt. And that's part of being human, right? When you play, you make mistakes and people get broken bones and they get scratches. So I want you to be mindful of that and really go back to the last episode because, we explored gentle parenting not working. And I think it's a larger thing. I am calling it that, but it is this hyper vigilant parenting that we always have to be on guard for our kids' self-esteem and making sure that they feel loved and supported. You being a responsive parent is loving and supportive. It may not always be what your child agrees with. It may not be what your child wants. They may kick up against the rules. They may have crappy behavior in spite of everything, but it's okay for them to have those uncomfortable feelings. And it's okay for them to work through them with your assistance or sometimes without. So that is the number one thing. And I always say I'm Gen X. We were the generation of benign neglect. And I think we're the ones doing it, right? I think this is more Gen Xers than it is maybe older millennials, but we are committed to doing what our parents didn't do. But what we're doing is creating fragile people. Now you can be loving and supportive and protective without being intensive. The other side of intensive parenting is educating. And I bring this up in my book, Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler, right? Like stop thinking your child is an empty vessel that needs to be filled and let them explore the world at their pace on their terms. Yes, we read to them. Yes, we care about their education. But I kid you not, I am getting parents of kids of potty training age who are concerned about their college resumes. Like it has gotten through the roof. And I bring up this scenario that I witnessed in that chapter of Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler, where I was on the beach and this kid was just, mom was sitting there and the kid was drawing in the sand and he was like 2.5, 3. Mommy, look, circle. He drew a circle. The mom launched into a 15-minute lecture on pi, 3.14 for like circumference. And I was like, dude just drew a circle. And that is age appropriate to be proud of drawing a circle in the sand, right? But this idea that we have to constantly be educating, constantly narrating, constantly stuffing their brains, and we justify all kinds of things with education. Like we have to justify free play because it's good. It's good for their brains. It's good for their brain development. It's good for their emotional intelligence. Or they could just play. Right? Like we have to justify everything. And it's kind of kooky. Like, don't let your kid be a kid and teach them things. Yes, but also stop educating. The education academic thing has gotten out of control. You guys know, or maybe if you're new to me, you don't know, I am so against early academics. But one of the things we look at when we look at teens and the depression and the suicide rate, I know social media has a huge thing to do with it. I know technology has slipped through our fingers. It's gotten out of control. I know that, but nobody brings up the pressure of academics. I have heard of more local high school seniors killing themselves than I have ever heard in my entire life right now, because the pressure of college and the pressure that parents put on these kids is insane. Like, it's just crazy. So let go of that if you can. I know it's hard, and I know we all want our kids to do well in life. And I know it's challenging in this environment with like tons of homework. I have several parents in the Oh Crap Cafe who just started homeschooling because their kindergartner or their first grader was being sent home with an hour and a half worth of homework. That poor kid has sat in school for 6 hours, and now you have to be the taskmaster at home when you should just be connecting with your kid, cooking dinner, playing, those kinds of things. So it's something that we have to pull back on. And it's hard because it's so societal. So you really have to push against the societal norm. And that might mean going to the teacher and saying, we're not doing this. Like, he's in here for 6 hours a day. And when he gets home, he needs to decompress, not be all riled up again because he didn't do something. And it's a hard thing to push against, I think, because again, too, it's like I had to consciously drop out of that because parents around me, Pascal turned 18, everybody was like, college, college, college. And like, just the pressure on the kids. I've said this numerous times on this podcast. Pascal would go to their house and come back like shaking. He'd be like, I'm getting secondary stress. Like, everybody's yelling at each other and crying and everybody's worried about the money. And, that's why we discussed alternatives to college. Cause I was like, I don't want to be that stressed out. Do you? And he was like, no. So we have to be really cautious of these things. Now, the other thing with time is a crisis of self-care. And I think this becomes even harder. Well, no, I can't even say that it's harder. It may be harder for stay-at-home parents. Maybe work gives you a sense of fulfillment and you're away from your kids. But I don't like to count work as self-care, even though it might feel like it. I think, with barriers of time and money are particular. Another thing that's happening with self-care is we get into intensive parenting because we feel guilt because we've worked. I definitely have felt this. I've written 3 books in Pascal's lifetime in which I had to put my head down. He had many days of eating cereal for dinner and, could kind of do whatever he wanted because I had deadlines. And I get it. And then you have guilt. You have guilt that you didn't spend as much time. So then you go overboard. You go overboard on activities. You go overboard on this, that, and the other thing because you have parental guilt. And then you get into that intensive parenting where I need to play with her. I need to, I do need to devote all my time or she's going to have terrible self-esteem. So that mom guilt, that dad guilt keeps us on a treadmill, right? And I think the activities is part of the hyper intensive parenting and part of the education. Don't get left behind, like enrichment. Like, never before have we had enrichment for 3-year-olds. Like, play. That's what they need to do. Play. Really good play opportunities, which for the most part can be free. You can go to the playground, organize playground play dates or soccer games, or just, go on your town's Facebook page if you can. Just figure that part out because that can be free and free up some of your time because we're doing too much. We're just doing too much. And yes, it's with the hypervigilance and yes, it's with the education, but some of it's just doing too much and we're expecting too much of ourselves. So what are the things, one of the things, if you are feeling really burnt out and you feel like, holy shit, I get no self-care, write down all the things you do. Because here's the thing I have found. And I know this to be true of me, and I know this to be true of quite a few of my friends, and I know it to be true from some of the things that people wrote on Instagram. You may have a certain way of being in your house, right? Especially if you're a mom. Dads, I think, are this way, but maybe not to the degree that moms are. So you have a certain way of being. I love a fucking clean house. Like I thrive under routine and a clean house, preparing meals ahead of time. That is my zone. I love it. However, more recently, I've realized I I could be cleaning house all day. I could be organizing. The house itself is its own creature, right? Like there's always something going on. If it's not fall cleaning, it's washing the windows. If it's not that, it's just keeping the house clean or tidied. Then you might need a new roof or a remodel, or then the snow's going to hit and I'm going to have to shovel. Like the house itself is like another thing that needs to be cared for. And you have a way of being, but sometimes that way of being has to shift if you're going to get time for yourself. There is no one that's going to give you that time. Your child is never going to say, hey, why don't you take an hour and sit down and relax? Probably your spouse isn't going to do that. I hope they do, but sometimes we get so caught up in the minutia of the day to day that we don't allow that time for ourselves. Just the other day, my kitchen, I have discovered my kitchen is so small that I kind of need to do dishes as I go, because if I want to cook something, like I'm just going to have to do the dishes. And I started making, I think it was maybe a couple months ago, a disaster of a mess. Like I was like, I'm not using the same thing twice. I'm not washing anything. I'm just going to use all the dishes to cook all the food. And everything was a disaster. There were dishes everywhere. And Pascal was gone. And I was like, you know what? Oh, I need to do those dishes. And I was like, I had just cleaned off my deck. The leaves are falling, cleaned off my deck and my fire pit was there. And I was like, no, I want to light a fire. And I was like, you can't light a fire. Who do you think you are? You're by yourself. There's no company. You can't light a fire and leave the dishes. Like the dishes, if you do the dishes, you're going to feel better. Right. And I was like, no, I want a fire. I want to read my fiction book. I'm reading this great book and I want to read it. And it's just nonsense fiction. And right. And so I lit a fire and I sat down and I had a cup of hot chocolate and I read my fiction book for like an hour. And guess what? I went back and did the dishes and I did it with renewed vigor because I was like, ooh, I just did a really fun thing for myself. I lit a fire. Who lights a fire just for themselves, right? It feels like absolutely decadent. But I had to let go of that part of like, oh, I will feel better. Because I do. I feel better when the house is clean. I feel better when everything's done. I feel better when my to-do list is checked off. But then that doesn't leave very much time for me. And I try putting self-care on my to-do list, but it's the first thing that gets kicked off, right? So I want you guys to make a list of all the things, or maybe how you like to operate in your house. So the things you think make you feel better. I just feel better when all the summer stuff is packed away and the winter stuff is out. Okay, fair enough. Does it have to happen immediate? Or can you just take off for the gym? Can you sit down and read a book? So that's what a lot of people said on Instagram that I thought was really great, is like reading books. And I've mentioned that before, right? Like give me 10 minutes with a trashy fiction book and I'm good to go. I know that a lot of people said working out. I can't recommend this enough. You may not be doing a workout like go to a gym. Maybe you don't have time or childcare. It's okay. You can get a $5 bucket from Lowe's or Home Depot and fill it with rocks. You can lift something heavy, which will behoove you. I want you guys all strength training. Anybody listening to my podcast should be strength training. So definitely do that. But even walking, yoga, stretching, a 10-minute something, even doing some air squats or whatever you can, getting some movement in. Here's the thing. You have to mitigate your rage. There is parental rage, mom rage in particular, when we are stretched too thin. And some of that is real resentment, right? Some of that may be your partner not showing up. Maybe your mental load is way too heavy and maybe you have an unwilling partner. I work with a lot of people whose partners just really maintain that that's all women's work and I'm just going to bring home the money. And there's all kinds of situations, okay? But no one's going to give you that time. And you have to mitigate the rage, whether the rage is because of someone else or just the rage of being a mom. And I don't think we talk about that enough. Like this, you become a new person when you become a mom. You are not the person you were before, right? And we don't talk about that. We don't talk about the person you become. You lose yourself those first couple of years because all you're doing is feeding and changing diapers and feeding and changing diapers and feeding and changing diapers and doing laundry, right? Like that's all that happens, right? And so you lose yourself and then you have to kind of find yourself again. And there's all these things that pile on against us, whether it's societal, systemic, household, partners, or just crying kids. We have bubbling rage inside us and you have to mitigate that rage. If you don't mitigate that rage, it comes out in you being a bitch. It really does. It just comes back. I have started rebounding. I don't know if I mentioned that before. I'll try to put a link for my rebounder in the show notes if you're interested. It's a mini trampoline. Fucking best thing ever. Like, best thing ever for mitigating my rage. It just goes away. I get happy. I, Again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it's gotten to the point where, like, if I'm getting a little bent about something, Pascal will say, "Hey, why don't you go bounce?" I think that's really funny. But there's all these things that I do to help. It's not just self-care, it's mitigating the rage. And there are just things about being a parent that are just wildly unfair. And one of them's not getting time to yourself. So, like, you'd be rageful about that. So I really recommend lifting heavy things. If you can get to a gym, fantastic. If you can't, just start with a couple of dumbbells. You can walk with them. You can lift them. Get yourself strong while dispelling some of your stuff. Because I feel like, as moms particularly, again, all parents, but moms particularly, it stacks up behind us. And then we blow our gasket, you know? And it's funny because, next episode, I'll talk about Italy and the stuff Pascal and I learned. But basically, one of the things that happened is he asked me for something in a wrong time, and there was a cumulative buildup, and I blew my stack, and he was blown away. He was like, "You overreacted," and I was like, "No, I'm going to tell you all the things that led up to that moment." So when we lose our shit with our kids, it's usually not just because they just did something. Like, there can be times when maybe they throw a matchbox car at your face and it hits you, like, you lose your shit because it hurts like hell. But a lot of times it's because we have resentment. It's because we have rage. I think resentment always means a boundary is being crossed. So I think you should always attend to resentment, figure out where that is stemming from, and see if you can fix that. But rage, I think, just happens. I think it's a natural thing that happens in motherhood when things just get too much. We're overwhelmed, this, that, and the other thing. Now, the other crisis with time, as I alluded to earlier, was activities. And on Instagram, I was happy to see that the parents with, like, really defined self-care all said, we started slowing down. We gave up activities. We stopped doing sports. We made a conscious decision to slow down as a family. And that brought so much more time back to the family. So I thought that was worth mentioning, because, you know, I harp on this all the time, especially for the under 5 crowd, that these activities are meaningless. Like, they're meaningless at this age. Yes, I know that sports builds, there's team building stuff, and all that stuff can come later. But I also think that it's really important as we go into the holidays to remember that as well. It's so tempting to get the photo op. It's so tempting. They look so cute in their Christmas outfits or in their Halloween costume. And I know this podcast is after Halloween, but it's, we're so tempted to take part in these things that were really more designed for your gardening years, your 6 to 12-year-olds. And we bring in the little ones, and then we're shocked. We're shocked that they have a meltdown. We're shocked that they want more candy. We're shocked that they're not well behaved, or they take the bows out of their hair. You know, it's so tempting to get the photo ops in in the holiday season, and really, it's just better to bring it all way back down. And I have slowed down my holiday season, and I don't even have a little one. And it's just been so much better. So, like Chantel and I had talked about a few episodes ago, how do you want your holiday season to look? How do you want your family life to look? Because you're in more control of that than you think. You don't have to be pulled along societal trends to do more, do more, do more. And I really encourage you to find that time, even if you're, you know, a stay-at-home parent who has, you know, very little money or resources, no child care, you know, having children play independently, get some play dates going on. I think it's really hard if you have one kid, because then you get stuck kind of being the playmate, but you shouldn't be. And so, you know, what can you do? What can you do to build that? And sometimes it's stepping out of your comfort zone and being more forthright about friends. But I really encourage you, Facebook town groups are great. You know, anybody want to meet at the playground? My kid's 3. That can be super helpful, because our mental health is deteriorating. I had done the phone burnout episode a while back, and I think you should revisit that too, because I think the phone is stressing us out. It's just keeping this, like, super dopamine high going, and that can be really stressful. But I love to reverse engineer a problem, and I'm just seeing it, and I'm seeing weakened parenting because of it. Oh, I know what a couple of people said on Instagram: sleep, prioritizing sleep. And I have been being really vocal on Instagram about sleep. This like lack of sleep, when you chip away at sleep, you chip away at your parenting. Anything that takes you, you have to think of all these like brutal self-care things as taking care of your parenting and nurturing that parenting relationship. So you know how when we talk about like when you enter an intimate relationship, there's three parties. There's you, your partner, and the relationship itself. And I think the same goes for parenting. Parenting is the relationship, right? Between you and your child. And if we want to protect that, so it's a sacred thing, and we want to constantly check in, but you cannot pour from an empty cup. You've got to put on your oxygen mask first. All the cliches really hold. Those aren't just trite things, because you need to be well slept, well fed, well taken care of. And yes, you have to fight for it, because everybody is going to be clawing at you for your time and for your energy. And so setting those boundaries, working it out with your spouse, there's a million ways you can approach this. Again, even without a lot of time or finances, but it's crucial that you do these things, even going to bed an hour earlier or reading instead of just binging a show. The dividends are huge, right? And they feel so meaningless and small, and like, that's not going to move the dial. But it does move the dial. I need you guys to protect yourself so you're at your very best. And you're never going to be at the very best you can be, right? You got a kid. They're automatically draining you. They're sucking your lifeblood out of you, right? But when we protect ourselves, we protect our parenting instinctively. And it's just a byproduct. So please, please, please figure out, take this Surgeon General's warning seriously. It's hazardous to your health, particularly your mental health. What is draining you? And I'd love if you join the Oh Crap Cafe. We talk about this stuff all the time on our live calls, but also, go ahead on social media. And if you want to comment, I really want to hear, like, what are your drains and how can you plug them up? What is making you so overwhelmed? And it's not, and out of the, I think the biggest things are, what can we control? I can't control the fact that you might both need to work. I can't control the fact that you're single and you may need to work 2 jobs. But then what is in your control, and how can you do that? And I think that's, again, where that parental guilt comes into play with, I'm supposed to be doing this, I'm supposed to be doing that. Because we're out of time, we tend to cater to our kids more. The New York Times podcast, it's called The Daily. They did an episode on this called The Parents Are Not All Right. And there was the most interesting statistic, which is current parents who work outside the home spend more time with their children than the average 1970s stay-at-home mom. That is shocking. So it's this intensive parenting, and how can we scale back on it and give ourselves more? Because the intensive parenting is getting in the way of our self-care. So I know I'm just summing it up, but I'm also solidifying my thoughts about it, right? So we got the hyper-vigilant parenting that includes hyper-vigilant academics and a self-esteem building and gentle parenting. And that, I think, is taking up a large portion of our time that we should be nurturing ourselves. And nurturing ourselves, in case you haven't heard this, or in case you need a reminder, self-care is not selfish. It's life-giving. It's life-giving to your kids, because don't be a martyr and get yourself so strung out that then you're just a bitch all day long, because you're not doing your kids any favors. That's not nurturing the parenting relationship either. Okay? Okay. All right, you guys, as always, I super appreciate you, and I appreciate you listening, and rock on and have a beautiful day.
Okay, bye everyone. Just a reminder, if you need additional resources, I have Oh Crap Potty Training. I have Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler. Those books are available everywhere you want to find a book. You can also go to my website, jamieglowacki.com, where you can book private sessions with me, buy any of my courses. Those are really geared towards potty training help. And also, I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore, and I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, jamie.glowacki, and I do a lot of lives. and usually posting a lot of good information. So those are extra resources for you. And as always, rock on. Have an awesome day.